Okay, good morning guys. I wanted to create a quick revision video for you to watch this evening with some practice tasks to attempt, but also some tips for tomorrow's exam. Okay, so tomorrow's paper 1, that is the reading one source and then doing a piece of creative writing. Okay, so pause this video now so you can read this very short extract which will form the foundation of today's revision session. So you can pause it now or you can screenshot it or take a picture on your phone, but this is the extract that you're going to use for today's revision session. Okay, let's start with question 1. So remember, for this one, you need to select 4 points that are linked to the question. So make sure you read that question very carefully and see what you're being asked to look at. So for this question, you are listing 4 things that Frankie does. You can make inferences, but you don't need to. You are literally picking out the information. So Frankie went into the bank. Remember that you need to write in full sentences. You only get 5 minutes. Anything above, if you don't need that full 5 minutes, you should use that additional time to move on to question 2. So pause this video now and have a go at that task. Okay, so what I've done here is I've put a range of different answers. All right, so to perfect your revision, can you find out which ones aren't correct? Okay, so as I've always said about AQA, some of them are tricky. Go through that list and pause the video now and work out which ones aren't correct. Okay, so how many of those did you get right? So number 2 was incorrect. Frankie entered the bank carefully. No, he looked at the customers carefully. So that's why it's important to read the whole sentence. Frankie was furious. No, there's no indication that he was angry. Frankie was singing to himself. No, his mind is filled with a chant, and that was the trick. The trick there. A chant is, I have to do this, I have to do this. It's not a song, it's a chant. So that was the trick one there. Okay, so this is question 2. So first thing to do is make sure that you check the question. How does the writer use language to present Frankie's thoughts and emotions? This is very similar to the one that we were looking at this week about the escaped hot air balloon. Thoughts and emotions is not something we've particularly come across. It's well worth revising this one again. So it's like, what language features show his thoughts and emotions? So the first thing to do is work out what are his thoughts and emotions, and therefore what language devices have shown those thoughts and emotions. So remember, you get 5 minutes annotation time, 10 minutes response time. You're looking for language features. Firstly, as we've always done in class, highlight the things that show the language features first, and then look, do you know what technique it is? Can you pick out whether it's a simile, a metaphor, an emotive word, colour imagery? What can you spot there? And then annotate. You're only going to be able to talk about 2 or 3 of those. So then pick which the highest leverage ones. Which ones can you say most about? In your 10 minutes response time, you're going to use your what, how, why structure. Remember, that's the basic the writer uses. For example, this shows. And if you can, if you've got time in the last minute, write an overall. What overall do you learn about Frankie's thoughts and emotions? So pause the video now and give that a go. Okay, so on the screen now, you can see 2 responses, 2 different ones. What I would like you to do is pause the video and read those responses and think about which one is better and why. So pause the video now, think which one is better and why. Okay, so we've got the 2 answers going on here. So let's have a look at which one is the higher response. So question A, the writer presents Frankie's emotions as being linked to stress and fear via the phrase sweating hand tightly gripped. Excellent. Clear what? The verb sweating suggests fear, as that is often how people respond in such situations. perfect, picked out a language device and talked about the effect of that. The adverb tightly clearly indicates Frankie's concern that will not be able to go through with the robbery. Metaphorically, this could represent how rigidly Frankie is having to control himself in order to commit a crime. The verb gripped is another clue as to how desperate Frankie feels, as the word suggests urgency or a serious situation. Otherwise, the word held could have been used. So that's a really good response. Secondly, the writer uses language to prevent Frankie as being nervous and frightened, deafening, hammering heartbeat. This metaphor suggests that Frankie is in such a state of distress that his heart is booming in his ears. The verb hammering creates the fact that Frankie's whole body is being overpowered by his heart and his nervous state. And instantly, I can see the second one is a better response because it's clearly explaining the effects of those words. Okay, so that's the key. What's the effect of the words? What does it communicate to the reader? Okay, so my favourite question, the structure question. This is the first time you're going to read the text in full. So you get 5 minutes to read that and annotate what's happening. Just remember, it's saying what you see. What are you looking at the start? What does it move to? What are you then focused on? Whose voice are you hearing? So you're looking at annotating that at the side. You want to think about things like internal thoughts, the actions of the character. Is it establishing the setting and the character? Does it start in the middle of the action? So remember, we talked about this week, does it end on a climax, on a cliffhanger? What is the sentence structure telling you? Are any ideas repeated? So think about all those structural devices. Remember, you are not talking about language. Okay, you were talking about structure only. So you're just thinking about why is the writer put it together that way. Okay, so why does in the Jaws extract, why do they shift between the perspectives? Why with Enduring Love did they start with in the middle of the action with the little boy in the hot air balloon and it trying to escape? So what effect do those things have on the reader? Okay, so here are some things that you could have said about structure. So at the start of the text, we see Frankie beginning his robbery journey and we are focused on what will happen next. So it establishes the character, and as a reader, we are curious to discover whether he will actually go through this act of robbery. The focus then shifts to the image of the gun. We've got this really nice zoom in and we become aware of Frankie's heart hammering. This reveals to the reader that Frankie's prepared for violence and that he's frightened. We very much wonder at that point what his motivation is, as he doesn't seem to want to do it. We're wondering as a reader, we are curious as to why he's there. When Frankie then reaches the counter, it's his pivotal point, it's the climax, it's the volta, okay, as he's committed to his actions. So the tone shifts. Readers are once again intrigued and puzzled as it's revealed internally that Frankie is reluctant to act in this way. Please don't smile. We then shift to Frankie demanding the money. We've got this use of dialogue as if from a great distance to represent the fact that although he's physically committing to the act, it is not part of who he is psychologically. So the reader very much see that he's separated himself from the act. Focus on the final image. The final scene of the text returns the motivation to the opening scene. So you can always talk about how the end links back to the beginning. And what does that reveal to the reader? It reveals that he's so nervous that he's committing the crime. And very much as readers, we are interested and sympathetic. So remember what I've said before. What does that structure do to the reader? How does it make us curious? How does it make us empathize? It makes the reader want to what? Okay, make sure you explain that. Okay, so just considering everything that I've just said, pause the video now and have a go at that activity. Can you talk about the structure of this very short text? Okay, so this is what it might look like in reality. Does your response sound like this one? The writer starts the text by immediately creating a sense of hidden tension. Inside, sweating hands. The use of this hidden detail interests the reader as we wonder what else will be revealed. By the writer sharing Frankie's internal thoughts, I have to do it, which are repeated, we understand that Frankie is constantly having to urge himself onwards. This is a key structural feature, as we immediately understand that Frankie is not a criminal by nature, and he is somehow being forced to commit this crime. We are intrigued as to why. The final paragraph is short and shifts the scene to Frankie's home, 2 miles away. The reveal that Frankie's family is threatened by the dangerous men violently suddenly explains why Frankie is committing the crime. The final detail in the simple sentence implies that the men are criminals, and so Frankie's desperation is made clear. As readers, we are likely to be eager to see how Frankie and his family progress. So remember, you've only got 10 minutes response time. If you're a slow writer, beginning and the end, but always the beginning and the end, even if you just say something about the final sentence. Okay, question 4, the most important question on the paper. Remember, you were better off answering 1 and 4 than doing 1, 2, and 3 and missing out 4. It's a nice, easy question. Every single one of you can cope with this. So you're focusing on a particular line. Make sure you check the line number. Okay, you know what I'm speaking to when you make that mistake. You've got 5 minutes to annotate, so highlight the bits that you might want to talk about, 20 minutes to respond. Start by explaining your response to the statement, and then you're using the what, how, why structure to analyse the effectiveness of the language and structural features. So we've got a statement here. A student, having read this section of the text, said, "This part of the text where Frankie commits the crime is where we have most sympathy to him." So, do you agree? Explain yes, why you agree. And then all you have to do is pick out the language and structural features that make you agree or disagree. So, firstly, I agree with the statement because of this technique. This makes me think, this makes me feel. Okay, so remember, you must talk about language and structural features in question 4. Okay, you've got 2 answers on your screen. Pause the video now, read those answers and decide which one is better and why. Okay, so both responses are incredibly good, whereas A is very much quite a simple what, how, why with an explanation of the effects of those and linking it back into the statement. The second one is that just that little bit more detail. Both are really good. Okay, however, make sure that you are picking out the language devices. So the second one is really great in terms of the fact that it's actually talking about in a bit more detail. However, do not be tricked. It hasn't picked out the language devices, whereas the first one has picked a structural one, it's perspective, it's picked the internal struggle, and it's talked about metaphor. So remember, you've got a habit of doing this. You're really good at explaining the effect, but you forget to pick out the language devices. So make sure that you do that. Okay, so this is question 5. You should be prepared for this. My feeling is that unless you are really good at story writing, you should always go for the picture, go for the description. It's easier. It is usually related to the photograph and the story that you've just read as well, so you can borrow that structure. So unless you know how to use speech and punctuate it, don't use it. However, it is a perfect way of illustrating you can use a range of punctuation. Check that you're setting it out correctly by looking at the source. Does it use any dialogue? If it does, you can borrow that structure. You can magpie it. You need to use paragraphs when you change time, place, person speaking. If you forget to put your paragraphs in, you need to go back and read at the end and add them. Okay, so every time you change time, so later that day, later that morning, a minute later, you've got to change paragraph. If you change place, you move from the front of the room to the back of the room, it's a new paragraph. If you introduce a new character, you need a new paragraph. If a new person starts speaking, you need a new paragraph. Okay, make sure your writing starts and ends well. The first sentence and the last one are the first and last thing the examiner will read. Do not start off in a boring way. Start with an adverbial phrasal place. So at the back of the market. Start with time, later that day. Start with an ly word or an ing word. Do not start with something dull. It's your first impressions count. You should check your work at the end. Do not add anything extra, maximum 2.5 pages, but read it. Read it so you can hear it in your head. Is your punctuation in the right place? Are you using don't, can't? Check for your apostrophes. Okay. Are you repeating the same word over and over, like walked, Make sure that you are checking those. Hear it in your head and make edits. Remember, a student who makes edits is conscientious, they are hardworking, it's worth extra marks. Okay, good luck tomorrow, guys.